All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm going to call the raffle and then we'll get started with our next presentation. If your name is in the raffle, you must be present to win. So again, thank you to everyone for celebrating Wendy Jackson and all the wonderful work that she did over the years. In our impromptu celebration, celebrating someone special in this room, we collected $112. So thank you to everyone who contributed. And 60 cents. Well, this is a imaginary $10, so I'm gonna pull again. I'm not sure if this is a donation, but it has a name on it. So thank you if you're planning on donating, but you're a winner today, Brenda W.
I was donating for somebody else.
That's okay. You're a winner today.
All
You
right.
deserved it.
Well, thank you.
Sorry.
Let me give you my 50 cents.
All right, congratulations. And thank you again to everyone in the room. All right, we're going to go to our next part of our schedule. So we have Narrative Change for Housing Solutions by Eddie and Corey, presented by Eddie and Corey.
Thank you so much for having us. My name is Edie Irons. I'm the Director of Communications at All Home. And this is Corey Fisher. He's the lead narrative strategist at the Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California. So we're going to dive right in. And the purpose of this presentation is to give you some practical tools and resources and best practices for sharing powerful stories for impact, for changing the narratives that we all hear out there about homelessness and housing and the issues that we work on, and just increasing the impact of all of your communications to bring about the change that we're all trying to work on. And before we get into it, we're going to hold time for questions at the end. We will have some interaction and stuff go back and forth during the presentation. But if you have questions that come up, go ahead and write them down on the index cards on your tables. We don't want you to forget them. And hopefully we'll have plenty of time to answer them at the end. And also just want to recognize the expertise and the wisdom and the experience that you all have in this room. We're not coming in here, trying to be the experts. We're just trying to give you more tools to do the good work that you're already doing and answer questions that you might have. And we were so inspired by the awards just now, and hearing those stories, we're like, wow, these folks have a lot of inspiring stories ready to go, literally already written down. So, we're excited for you all to just run with this. And all right, so our agenda, we're going to do just a quick kind of 101, what is narrative? Then we're going to get into how we shift narratives and some of the research that we've done that shows what works and how important stories are to that work. Then we're going to turn it over to you, do a little exercise where you can practice that narrative shift yourselves, and we'll share back a little bit. And then we're going to talk about ethical storytelling. share some of what we've learned works. And again, we know there's a lot of expertise in the room about that, so we have some time to hear from you all about what has worked for you. We'll share some resources quickly and then hopefully have plenty of time for Q&A. So just to introduce ourselves, again, I'm Edie. This is Corey. I work at All Home. He works at NPH. And we've been working together for years now, trying to build capacity around communication, storytelling, and narrative in the housing justice movement around the Bay Area. We've done trainings like this all over the place. We've created a bunch of materials and a bunch of content as well. So we've been doing this work kind of like the picture here. We're trying to supercharge your efforts and really help make all of our work more impactful, more powerful. And this is how we do it. Before we get too much further in, we just wanted to kind of go over some ground rules for our time together. I think the first one, just respect, is a kind of all we need. And it all comes back to that. But just hoping folks will listen deeply and openly. I heard in the awards, Lynette is good at listening to understand. Make space for others if you're someone who is quick to speak, and consider taking space if you are often quiet. We'd love to hear from you in the Q&A. Just be open to different perspectives and, curious if you hear something surprising or that you're not sure about. To hold confidence, right, so that we can speak openly in this space, knowing that, anything we share won't leave the room. And then these last ones are as much for me and Corey as they are for you, but we'll try to be aware of time and our agenda, and we appreciate it if you are holding the mic, that you do the same. And as always, just to be mindful of power dynamics. And again, we're really here to learn from you and hear what you're interested in, as much as to tell you what we think about all this stuff. So quick little warm-up activity. I'd just love to raise hands and shout out in a sentence or so. And I guess I'll run to you with the mic so that folks on Zoom can hear. And if folks on Zoom want to put something in the chat, I think, Chris, do you mind? You can tell us if there's something in the chat we can lift up. But what is a story about homelessness or a related issue that you work on that's missing from media cover right now? You got one. In a sentence, yeah? Go ahead.
So in the media, they always love cover, oh, it's drug addicts, it's this, it's that, these people, it's so many, and we can give a list. They never cover how most of the times there's such community in a lot of these encampments that can really teach a lot of these folks and a lot of folks who are of us as housed what a community means, the level of protection that they offer one another, the level of care, their family. And that's something that the media doesn't capture. And hello, there's a lot of people who are teachers that were homeless that I work with. There was a lot of people who had different professions that are homeless, but the media only wants to capture what the media wants to capture, which is so unfair truth.
Right. Thank you. Coming to you.
Short and simple. They
Sweet.
don't talk about the oldest and the youngest of the homeless population. They don't talk about how many seniors are homeless, and they don't talk about how many children are out there on the street.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Good one. And that's a good one for shifting narratives too, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think one thing the media doesn't cover is the accomplishments that different people have in the homeless system. So if someone gets housed, right, you don't hear about that. But if you most likely hear about how many people are unhoused. And then the second thing also is just the resources that you have for homelessness. If you have media, right, and you have resources and there's this crisis, you should be able to cover the resources that are able to help homelessness.
Got it. Okay, I'm gonna go to Darrell, and then I've got one more on Zoom.
I think I'm kind of building on what Ray had said, but I think that in the media, they don't cover what it feels like to be homeless. You know, what it feels like to be on the streets and to be in that hopelessness situation, to not have access to resources, to have a need to medicate yourself just to cope with the experience of sleeping on the street. I think they don't cover that. It's more of a step away from and looking at the impact or the nuisance factor, as opposed to what that. And I just hope that, you know, us by expressing that and calling it into existence, that we can see more of that.
Thank you. Something from the chat?
We do.
All right.
From Sabrina Abong in the chat, they never cover success stories. Flip the script.
Perfect. All right. You're all in the right place. And we are in the right place. Exactly. So we're sorry? Do you have one more?
Just gonna say, help with people getting knowledge, just resources that way.
Resources for folks. Absolutely. For knowledge. Okay. Thank you. All right. I'm going to dive into a little narrative 101. Just what are we talking about here? What's the difference between messaging and stories and communications? We kind of throw these words around a lot these days. So how many folks saw the Barbie movie? Okay, not everybody. This is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. So, you know, Ken lives in Barbie Land, and his entire worldview is shaped by Barbie Land, where everything revolves around Barbie, and Barbie is the boss of everything. And then they visit our world, and Ken hilariously discovers patriarchy, and his eyes are opened, and he's like, what? I could be the center of this world. There's a whole other way for the world to be, right? And that was Ken getting a huge narrative shift, right? Because narrative is the ideas and the stories that define what we understand about our world, what we believe to be true. And consciously or unconsciously, narratives shape how we think, how we feel, what we believe, and what we disbelieve, right? It's the story we have in our heads about how things work. And it's a framework for ingesting new information. And when we hear new information that doesn't fit the narratives in our head, we often just dismiss it. So for example, if you believe in American dream narrative about, you know, people pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and personal responsibility, and if we all just work hard, we can buy a house. And then you see someone who's unhoused, you're like, well, what's wrong with them? What did they do wrong, right? But if you believe that housing is a basic human need, and you know that our systems were designed to exclude people from wealth and well-being, then when you see somebody outdoors, you think, well, what went wrong with our society that that person is sleeping on the sidewalk right now, or that they can't afford their rent, right? So there's a difference and right, like we all hold some different narratives and beliefs about how the world works, but there's some big shared ones as well. So narrative strategy is about helping people see how the world is constructed and how they can change it to be better. It's about changing what people think is possible so that we can change the rules and the structures that have never served everyone and that hold us all back. And here's some just examples that we see. These are real headlines, ripped from the headlines, literally, into our presentation, that I think we see all the time, right? That like, we're spending so much money and we're not seeing progress, or that our cities are struggling and, you know, everything's getting worse, or this scarcity mentality. We have a very strong scarcity narrative in this country, a zero-sum kind of, narrative that drives a lot of folks. So Corey and I rewrote these headlines to show you what a narrative shift could look like, right? Going back, you know, from we've spent billions and we're not seeing results. Our investments have kept homelessness from exploding. What would it take to do more, right? To show what's being done, not just what's not being done, right? Or that San Francisco is getting creative to bring people and businesses back downtown, right? There's actually a lot of innovation and effort behind kind of revitalizing cities after the pandemic. We could frame it in terms of that, right? Or, you know, having an abundance framework that we need to scale things up. So the previous one was there's never enough. A surge in need for shelter and housing overwhelms Bay Area providers. So we've said, well, we just need to scale this up, right? Service providers are striving to keep up with surging demand as rents continue to rise. And it's important to call out root causes and why things are the way they are. Because if you don't say that, people will just fill in the blanks with their own narratives, right? With their own beliefs. And again, none of these headlines are trying to pretend there's not a problem or be Pollyanna or fake about what's happening. It's just a different perspective. And the reason this is important, and if you take one thing away from our presentation, maybe it should be this slide, that data doesn't really change people's minds. Stories and feelings and emotions actually change hearts and minds. I see some big nods. You've probably seen this in your work, right? Like having personal connections and moving conversations and connecting with people and hearing their stories can really change how you think and what you believe. But if you hear a data point that is surprising to you, you are probably unlikely to change your core beliefs about that issue. And our facilitator in our storytelling initiative says data should be maybe a punctuation point, but not the headline. Okay, so your story should be your headline, and your data may or may not be necessary to kind of support that, but it really shouldn't be the focus. And I think it's over to Corey. All right, and we're doing pretty good on time.
I was so entranced, I forgot. I have to do this too. So we're going to take a look now at what's going on in the landscape, the narrative landscape, the information landscape in the Bay Area, right? Where we're all doing our work. What's happening? I want to start by sharing the theory of change. This is sort of the core narrative that we wrote together and have been using over the last year and a half in all of our work and offer to you today. And we'll come back to like why this. But we want to show hundreds of thousands of people in the Bay Area that when it comes to building a future of housing justice, hope is possible, and they have the power to make change happen by working together. That's the worldview we want people in the Bay Area to be holding. And the reason for that is because year after year in our research, we keep seeing housing affordability and homelessness are top concerns of many folks in the Bay Area. But we also see cynicism increasing too. And we see that cynicism getting in the way of winning change or supporting policies or voting for good things. And we think that's a really solvable problem. But why do we need to kind of seed and amplify a narrative like this to begin with? Let me kind of explain some of what we're seeing in the Bay Area. So this is something that I think we're all really familiar with in this room. The reality that the problems we face are often, but not always, more visible than the solutions we have. Right? The problems that we're working on, challenges of housing affordability, housing insecurity, homelessness, these are often visible problems. Not always though, right? And sometimes the less visible experiences people are having need to be made more visible. There's kind of a theme, right, of like what's visible and what's not, what's seen or unseen, who's heard or unheard, and what can we do to flip that? Because often our solutions are pretty invisible to most folks. So many of the stories that we just heard in the Wendy Jackson Awards are things that I'm very privileged to have just gotten to hear about. But I think we all know most people who are going around in their day-to-day lives in the Bay Area are not hearing those stories. People encounter the first reality of the problem, but they don't normally get to see when someone moves into affordable housing for the first time, or maybe has help to buy furniture for the first time. They don't see, like maybe you catch a ribbon cutting on the news if you're lucky, but you don't get to see people moving in with their boxes. You don't get to see when someone stabilizes in permanent supportive housing. We don't get to see when tenants organize to take their building off the speculative market. We don't normally get to see when a parent is able to raise their kids in affordable housing or over years. How does that change their lives? Those are solutions that remain somewhat invisible for a lot of people. And so the impact is we're hearing about the problem, we're seeing the problem, but we're not seeing what's working, which means people are going to be feeling pretty gloomy about the future. Here's another way of looking at this. Across the Bay, more than 44,000 people will become homeless in a given year. It's an average of the last 3 years. But in 2023, nearly 20,000 people in the Bay Area exited homelessness into permanent housing. And I'm kind of curious before we go on, how believable do those two statements sound to you in this room? Raise your hand if that sounds believable. You can either way. Oh, interesting. I was really curious which way this would go. We actually asked this question in our research last year of voters across the Bay Area. We said, here's two things. How believable is this? And what was really interesting was 81% of folks in the survey found that first number believable. How many people become homeless in a given year? It's almost everybody. But only 55% of people who took the survey found that second statement believable, that we're making progress, that nearly half that number were housed in the same year. They are both true statements. Yeah, sorry, thank you. That's an important thing for me to state. I'm not here to spread misinformation in the room. But how does that affect us when what is working doesn't feel true? So that's what we have to change, right? We just talked about what people feel is how they make decisions, how they build beliefs about the world and what's possible. So we have to change how people feel. And one of the ways we do that is we change what people are seeing. So we asked people also in our research, we've asked folks, would you say, we asked people first if you've seen anything recently about housing affordability in the Bay Area, and most people say yes. And if they say yes, we ask them, okay, would you say what you've recently seen is positive or negative? And it's not a surprise. Most people say negative. More people say negative than positive. And this actually is really important. Because when we correlate that to other questions we ask people, it turns out if you've seen negative information, only 15% of the people who say they've mostly seen negative information say they feel hopeful about the future of housing affordability in the Bay Area. That makes sense. But 53% of the people who say they've seen positive information say they feel hopeful about the future of housing affordability in the Bay Area. So what a difference this makes, whether you say you're seeing positive information or negative information. And it correlates to a whole bunch of other beliefs that people have about housing and homelessness. If you say you've seen positive info, you're more likely to say it's possible for us to address these issues. You're more likely to believe other people support those things. You're more likely to believe those true statements we just shared. And you're more likely to agree that there's things we can do and that you'll support them. This is the last chart, at least for a few slides. So some other way of looking at this, right, is what does it mean when people aren't hearing about solutions, they're not hearing about successes, they're not hearing about what we can do? We know that impacts how they think, but what about how it impacts what they think is possible in their community? So to answer this, we asked people to estimate how popular they think a few different ideas are in the Bay Area. So these are some pro-housing beliefs. It's a little small, so I'll read it out. So on the left is a belief of people who say they support building more housing in their neighborhood. Now we know from other research that actual support for that is 60%. That's a true statement too. That may not sound believable. But when we ask people to estimate, okay, how many people in the Bay Area do you think agree with that? Only 42% was the average number of folks estimated. So that's a big difference. It means most people in the Bay Area actually believe that a majority is against that idea, which makes sense, going back to what kind of stories we see in the news. We also asked people to estimate support for this idea, that there's a need for additional money to address housing affordability in the Bay. About 2/3 of the Bay Area believes that supports that statement. But when people guessed how many, like what the average support is, it was 55%. So they're guessing underneath that. And then the last is an idea that having a decent place to live is a basic human right. And when we asked that in our research, 73% of the Bay Area supports that idea. People guessed 60%. So I like this. People were like, okay, yeah, we think a majority believes this, but not a super majority. How does that change what you think is possible if you think 3 in 4 people you walk past on the street support the idea that having a basic place to live is a human right? Or if you know that a majority supports building more housing. So that's some of the science in our research. It's some of the landscape that we're doing this work within. So let's talk about what we do to fix this. How do we deliver positive information? How do we make solutions and people's experiences visible? And how do we help people feel part of a majority that can solve this, that can work together? One powerful way that we can do that is we can tell stories. That's something we can all do. That's something we can do if we have a lot of money in our budget. It's something we can do if we have less than a lot of money in our budget. We can do that with a whole bunch of tools that we all have in our pocket. There are a lot of ways for us to do this. And we've learned a bunch of lessons about storytelling through the work that we've been doing together. And we're going to share just a few insights from that work now. So first is going back just to reinforce this truth, that people make decisions based on how they feel more than data. And one of the things that helps people feel something is hearing a story. It's actually been measured by neuroscientists, the impact that hearing someone else's story can have in your own brain and your own body. It can actually change how you feel. It can make you feel stressed. It can make you feel hopeful and empathic and feel connected with powerful hormones in our bodies, right? It's a physical response. And one of the things that we did in trying to learn just how physical is that response, just how important is that response, is we showed some of our stories to some groups through a testing platform to find out how effective are they at shifting people's beliefs and behavior. And so here's a question we asked people after they had seen different stories. Some of them were our stories. Some folks saw a video about something else. Wasn't one of ours. We asked people, would you support raising the taxes that homeowners pay in order to build more housing that's affordable for low and middle income Californians? That's a tough question. That's like not how we would put it on a ballot or anything like that. Support for that is only at 35%. That's where it starts with that question. But if people saw one of our stories, on average, it moved people up 16 points in support of that idea. These were not stories that were like setting out to make the case for raising property taxes or even building more affordable housing necessarily. Some of them were, some of them weren't. They were stories that were mostly delivering people's lived experiences, people's experiences with housing insecurity, people's experiences gaining housing and how it impacted their lives, and just encountering those kinds of positive, hopeful stories moved people really significantly on this question, as much as 24 points in support. And it just didn't matter whose story was being told, what kind of issue they were talking about. This effect was pretty similar across all of them. Some of the stories particularly moved men, some women, some moved men and women together, some age groups or all age groups. Some stories really spoke to renters. Some stories really spoke to homeowners. Some spoke to both. But regardless, we saw this kind of overall movement. So what kinds of stories were they? Really, they were the kinds of stories that were just shared in this room. Stories that can inspire a feeling of courageous hope and motivate us to take action or continue doing this work. It's a little simple, right? But giving people a celebration of wins, no matter how small they are, helps people see that we're making progress. Evoking collective action, showing people working together to make change, helps people see that there's people around them who believe in the same things that they do, and that we have a mechanism for winning change. And showing examples of success over and over and over again is so key, because we know that most people aren't seeing the success stories that we're seeing. Should we watch them? Okay. This is a community leader in Concord talking right after winning a new policy at the Concord City Council. We didn't do much. We kind of treated it very simply. And actually, it was the most viewed video on our TikTok channel and had just awesome comments of support.
Tonight, we saw something happening. Sorry. Finally tonight, we see something meaningful for all standards. You know, like they're finally listening to us. I don't know. It's done. Sorry. I feel like finally they listen to us. Still, it's a fight, continuous fight, but I feel like finally, yeah, like I said, they listen to us. Our voices were heard.
Are folks on Zoom hearing? Could you hear anything? Okay.
Hold the mic up to the microphone.
Okay, good.
There's a yes on Zoom.
Yes on Zoom.
Should we
Let's
try
try
one
it
more
again.
time?
For a second.
We're glad they could get it.
We saw something happening. Sorry. Finally tonight, we see something meaningful for all standards. You know, like they're finally listening to us.
That's okay.
All right. Did you get the idea?
Yeah, so she's actually just talking about the experience of being at the city council meeting and winning this thing and what it means to her. And she's emotional and she's crying. It's actually like not the most important dialogue. It's a feeling just of being with someone, I think, in that moment. Here's another example. So we've heard, you know, people all the time are walking past construction. They have no idea that it's going to be affordable housing. So we thought, well, what if we could make some of that a little bit more visible?
This is what building an affordable future looks like. Charlie Chisholm Village in San Francisco's Outer Sunset. This site will become 135 homes with the city's first 100% affordable housing project for educators. 730 Stanton Street in the Haight-Ashbury. 160 affordable homes for transitional age youth and families. 855 Brannan Street in Soma. 220 new affordable homes for individuals and families. 4200 Gary Boulevard in the Inner Richmond. 98 new affordable homes for seniors. And guess what? We can build even more affordable homes if we join together to invest in a more affordable Bay Area.
So simple. Sure. Yeah. You know what? Go for it.
Affordable?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Because some things are affordable, but that's all. It's just one.
Just what does affordable mean?
What does
Yeah.
affordable mean? Because they use that word and
That's a fair question. We actually asked people last year kind of just to get a sense, like we know that like affordable housing means something very specific. Affordable housing developments serve specific communities. They have like very, it is defined. Most people don't know that or what affordable means. It can vary. So it can lead to a lot of, not a lot of shared understanding, but we asked people in general, we wanted to know, like, what do people feel about affordable housing? And I think the good news is that people tend to have good beliefs about affordable housing as an idea without even knowing sort of all the definitions about it. People tend to believe that it benefits their community, that it's dignified, and they actually tend to not hold some of the things that maybe from what we would be concerned about, what we see from our opposition, things that like we know, like maybe we would be worried, right? Do people think affordable housing brings crime to their area or makes them less safe? And actually, those were really low down. People didn't believe those things. So I think the general thing is just to feel kind of good about like using that term. People know there's that it means something, and we can get more specific with folks, but we don't always need to. And if you have other questions, I'm going to ask you just to write them down just for the sake of time. Let's watch one more video together. The first two were just things we shot on cell phones, right? Really casual. Here's something a little more produced, just a different way of doing it.
Your home starts from your mind. Knowing that you have where to live peacefully, your whole body becomes healed because you're comfortable, you know that your life is safe. As humans, each and every one of us has got a story to tell. I'm originally from Rwanda. Most of my relatives lost their lives during the genocide. In 2000, I was given asylum to come and live in the US. I will not miss my 16 years of homelessness, living on the streets. When you are in the dark, you might think that you've been buried. But the fact is, you have been planted like a seed to grow and give fruits. Housing has made everything for me change. My health has changed. I've been inspired in different ways. I'm so grateful for having acquired my affordable home, which is a source of peace, safety, comfort, and a stepping stone for my next chapter.
So just an example of what it looks like to try to both humanize the solution of permanent supportive housing, sneak in, sprinkle a little bit of facts in there about who needs it and why, but really focusing on one person's story, what it's meant for him. That's Solomon. He's amazing. This is one of those stories that we tested that you saw in that earlier chart, and to just name some things that we found that have moved people around. It moved some people. Folks who are kind of middle-aged, it moved to feel more that affordable housing benefits their entire community. It actually moved moderates on that too. And it helped low-income viewers feel more hopeful about the future. And folks with higher incomes, it helped feel that everyone in their community benefits from affordable housing. Made us feel really, those results made us feel really inspired ourselves, just to know that stories can kind of bridge between different communities. Encountering someone, hearing their experience really works in that way. Are we on time? Okay. So that's a little bit what we did in our storytelling work, and a little bit of the reasons why, and what it connects to in terms of doing that work of making our solutions visible, helping people see successes around them, and humanizing what that success looks like. That's not a story about data, it's a story about people's lives, right? So we are going to do an exercise in just